A judge stepping in like this means something went wrong. Before you scroll away, understand this. A federal court has just ruled that a presidential appointment was unlawful, an appointment designed to investigate a political opponent. This is not a routine case. Leticia James, the New York Attorney General, won a major fraud case against Trump last year. The penalties ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. In response, Trump appointed John Sarini as the acting U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of New York, which covers Albany. Sarini immediately launched a criminal investigation into James herself, examining whether she had overstepped her authority in pursuing Trump. This case is different because it represents direct retaliation using federal prosecutorial power against a state official who successfully held Trump accountable. The appointment process itself violated federal law. On the same day this ruling came down, Jack Smith, the former special counsel, testified before the House Judiciary Committee about his investigations into Trump. Judge Laura Scoffield ruled that Sarini's appointment violated the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. This law governs how temporary federal officials can serve. The judge found that Trump exceeded the time limits allowed and did not follow proper procedures. As a result, all subpoenas that Sarini issued to Leticia James's office were invalidated. The grand jury proceedings he oversaw were deemed invalid. Any investigation he launched must be handed off to a properly appointed prosecutor. The court found that when the executive branch ignores appointment rules to target political opponents, it acts without legal authority. Jack Smith testified under oath that Trump willfully violated the laws he swore to uphold. Smith stated that the evidence supported the charges in both the classified documents case and the January 6th case. These cases were dismissed not because of lack of evidence, but because of a Justice Department policy that bars prosecuting sitting presidents. Smith emphasized he would have prosecuted any president based on the same evidence. The standards applied to Trump would apply to anyone in that position. Trump has maintained that the investigation into him by Leticia James was political persecution. He has characterized his appointment of Sarini as a legitimate exercise of executive power. Trump has called Smith's prosecution a witch hunt and insists he did nothing wrong. However, the legal record tells a different story. The court found the appointment unlawful. The evidence, according to Smith's testimony, showed willful violations of federal law. This is part of a broader pattern. Multiple courts across different states have struck down similar acting appointments made by Trump. Each ruling establishes that these tactics violate federal law. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act was designed to govern temporary appointments in the executive branch. It sets specific time limits and procedures that must be followed. The law exists to prevent abuse of acting positions and to ensure Senate oversight. While presidents can bypass Senate confirmation temporarily, there are limits. Judge Scoffield's reasoning was clear. When an executive branch official ignores these appointment rules, specifically to target political opponents, that official acts without legal authority. Because Sarini's appointment exceeded statutory authority, all his actions as acting U.S. Attorney are void. This pattern extends beyond Albany. Courts across multiple jurisdictions have examined and struck down similar appointments. Each ruling creates legal precedent that makes future attempts more difficult. The judiciary is establishing clear boundaries on this practice. This case highlights a fundamental tension between federal and state power. Trump used a federal prosecutor to investigate a state official. Leticia James serves as New York's Attorney General, a state position. This dynamic threatens core principles of federalism. When federal prosecutorial power is weaponized against state officials, those officials may be intimidated from holding the federal executive accountable. The separation between state and federal authority exists to prevent exactly this kind of overreach. Trump has been bypassing the Senate confirmation process for U.S. attorneys nationwide. Acting officials don't face the same scrutiny as confirmed appointees. They can pursue aggressive investigations while legal challenges to their appointments work through the courts. Even if an appointment is eventually struck down, political damage can be done in the interim. Subpoenas create headlines. Investigations generate pressure. The fact that actions might not hold up legally doesn't erase their immediate impact. Looking ahead to 2026, the political landscape will shift with the midterm elections. Any retaliation scheme against Leticia James would need to restart from scratch with a properly appointed prosecutor. The window for this specific revenge plot appears to have closed. The independence of the Department of Justice is a cornerstone of democratic accountability. When federal prosecutors are seen as political weapons rather than impartial enforcers of the law, public trust erodes. Career prosecutors at the DOJ face pressure to serve a political agenda rather than pursue evidence wherever it leads. This undermines the institution itself. There is also a chilling effect on state officials. Attorneys general and other state prosecutors might hesitate to investigate federal officials if they fear federal retaliation. When that fear becomes a factor in prosecutorial decisions, it undermines the system of checks and balances that protects against abuse of power. The communities affected extend beyond political actors. New Yorkers rely on their attorney general to protect consumer rights, combat fraud, and enforce state laws. Americans across the country depend on the Department of Justice to operate impartially. When these institutions are compromised for political purposes, it's ordinary citizens who lose. Future generations inherit weakened institutions if these practices become normalized. The Constitution's Appointments Clause requires that principal officers be appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate. This requirement exists to prevent executive overreach. The separation of powers means that no single branch can act without limits. An independent judiciary serves as a check on executive abuse. That's precisely what we're seeing here. The principle that no one is above the law applies even to the president. Legal processes and procedures must be followed, even when investigating or acting against political opponents. Courts are enforcing these limits on executive power. These aren't abstract principles. They have real consequences. This case sets precedent for future administrations. It establishes standards for prosecutorial independence and clarifies the balance between legitimate executive authority and abuse of power. What this reveals is that institutional guardrails are functioning. Courts are willing to rule against a sitting president when the law requires it. A legal record is being built, regardless of immediate political consequences. These rulings will outlast any single administration. This ruling raises fundamental questions about executive power. Should presidents be able to appoint federal prosecutors without Senate confirmation? Where should the line be between legitimate executive authority and abuse of power? The courts are establishing boundaries, but the broader debate continues. Share your perspective in the comments. What reforms, if any, would strengthen these safeguards? Judge Scoffield's ruling and Jack Smith's testimony create an official legal record. Whether through future prosecutions, impeachment proceedings, or historical judgment, this record cannot be erased. The evidence remains, the court rulings stand, the testimony is on record. This is not about predicting outcomes or political preferences. It is about documenting what happened. A federal judge found a presidential appointment unlawful. A special counsel testified under oath about evidence of crimes. These are facts in the legal record. The reckoning may take different forms: state prosecutions, congressional action, or simply historical assessment. But the foundation is being laid in courtrooms and hearing rooms, one ruling and one testimony at a time. That is what makes this moment significant, regardless of where politics takes us next.